Okay, time हो गया. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. As you would recall, we are studying Surah Anfal, which is the 8th surah of the Quran, and in fact, it is the third surah of the second chapter of the Quran. Today, we will be finishing it off, hopefully. Also important that you might need to know, the important thing here is that this second chapter of the Quran actually represents the culmination of the Quran. It is the chapter in which the final verdict regarding the opponents of the Prophet have been pronounced, and the gradual progression has been seen in this chapter as well. So the first two surahs are An'am and Araf. Both of them are Meccan surahs, and they have a very important appeal regarding the belief of Tawheed and other important aspects of religion presented to the Quraysh. And in the next two surahs, which is of course the one that we are studying, Surah Anfal, and the next one, which is Surah Tawbah, they are taken to task for not complying with what they have been told, in spite of the fact that they are convinced about it. So remember, the nature of God's punishment is something like total communication of the truth to the people around the Prophet. It's not that they are left in the lurch. It's not that they're left with any confusion or any lack of information. Such is the nature of the message, that it is powerfully and conclusively and decisively conveyed. And not only is this something which is evident from the Quran, but we also know what is more evident is their confession in the Quran, that they are absolutely convinced, and their denial is deliberate. Their denial is intentional, in which, out of arrogance, out of vested interests, in spite of regarding the Prophet to be a true prophet, they went on to deny him. So because of this, of course, we find Surah Tawbah to be the surah in which their leaders have been announced, and they have been told that, well, they have a little bit of time still left to mend their ways. So as we shall see in our next session, when we start with Surah Tawbah, the ninth and the final surah of this chapter, and the fourth surah of this chapter, actually, the ninth being in the sequence of the Quran, you'll see that how, firstly, the idolaters, who were the nation of the Prophet, they are warned and they are given an ultimatum. Next, we find the people of the book. And then we find the hypocrites who had infiltrated in the ranks of the Muslims. So all these three denominations have been issued verdicts, which is of course going to be seen in the next surah. So for the moment, we will be just switching back to Surah Anfal and finishing it off. So the words are: "Lawla kitabun min Allahi sabaka lamassakum fima akhastum azabun azim. فَكُلُوا مِمَّا غَنِمْتُمْ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ." Had God's verdict not been written down before, that you should be given some more respite, a great torment would have visited you because of the attitude you had adopted. So, Muslims, do not pay heed to their objections, and the spoils of war you have obtained as ransom, consume them while regarding them to be lawful and pure, and keep fearing God. Surely God is forgiving and ever merciful. So this is a reference to the way adopted by the Quraysh, actually, to dislocate the Prophet and his companions from their houses. So they would be subjecting them to torment, and they followed them into Medina, and they tried to eliminate them from this world. And that is why it is said, "Lamassakum fima akhaztum azabun alim." A great torment would have visited you because of the attitude you had adopted. So the attitude was to dislodge the Prophet, dislocate him and his companions. And not only we see this happening, but we also saw in the earlier part of this surah that, on the pretext of protecting the caravan, they wanted to attack Medina so that they could just curb and finish off the growing Muslim forces in Medina. So they hatched this conspiracy, and they said they dispatched an army under the leadership of Abu Sufyan, and the pretext they took was that because Muslims are intending to attack the caravan that is coming across them, so they have launched this counterattack to protect that caravan from being plundered and looted. So, of course, before that, they were guilty of dislodging the Prophet. And the word actually which which is of special importance to note here in Arabic, is akhaza. Means it actually literally means to get hold of something, to just take away something. But here we can see the implication is that they should show gratitude to God that though their prisoners were captured, they were released on ransom. So we know that this is what happened in the Battle of Badr. And this was a directive of the Quran that all the prisoners of war, whatever be the situation, they have either be to be released on ransom or without ransom. They could not have been made as slaves. So instead of showing this gratitude, they, of course, we know what happened, and they persisted with their defiance and disobedience. And it was, of course, fully justified if they had been subjected to a decisive punishment, which is generally given to those who deny the prophets of God. And as a result, if their nation was totally wiped out from the face of the earth. But of course, they were still given time. So had they been destroyed at the time of Prophet's migration, that would have been totally justified. But still, they were given some more time to contemplate, and they actually called for their own doom when they started to launch offensives. So we know the first three battles that were fought were actually their offensives. The initiative came from them. Otherwise, they were being given more and more time. And of course, the important thing is that فَكُلُوا مِمَّا غَنِمْتُمْ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, that Muslims should not pay any heed to their objections. So the objection that they had raised was that why is that the Prophet of God and the religion of Prophet of God is this loot and plundering, and they are being asked to consume the money that they have looted from the enemy. So what we are told at Inna Allah Ghafurur Rahim, keep fearing God. Surely God is forgiving and merciful. Wattaqullaha Inna Allah Ghafurur Rahim. So without any hesitation, they should eat what is pure and wholesome, but they should fear getting entangled in something prohibited. فَكُلُوا مِمَّا غَنِمْتُمْ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. The spoils of war that you've obtained are absolutely halal, they're absolutely lawful and legal for them. And even if, in spite of this, they are guilty of some minor blemishes, they should rest assured that God is gracious and merciful, which means that if they are guilty of certain blemishes, then God is all forgiving and all merciful for them. يا أيها النبي قل لمن في أيديكم من الأسرى إن يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتيكم خيرا مما أخذ منكم ويغفر لكم والله غفور رحيم وإن يريدوا خيانتك فقد خانوا الله من قبل فأمكن منهم والله عليم حكيم. O Prophet, inform the captives in your possession. If God sees something good in their hearts, He shall grant you that which is better. He shall grant you that which is better than what has been taken from you, and shall forgive your sins. In reality, God is merciful, ever forgiving. So what is mentioned here is basically that if the Almighty sees in them, He looks upon them and sees in them there is a proclivity found in them, and inclination found in them towards justice, in view of this whole matter, and also the inclination to actually accept the truth. His grace and mercy will turn towards them and will bless them with the gift of faith, something which is far greater in extent to the ransom extracted for them. And surely the reward of this gift is eternal paradise, like that eternal life. So that is what they are being told, that inform the captives in your possession that if God sees something good in them, He shall grant them what is better for them, which is, of course, the inclination towards faith, inclination towards the truth, inclination towards justice. And they should realize that this is some of the best thing that, or in fact, the best thing that could have happened to them. And why is it said, and if they seek to betray you, then this is quite expected from them. This is because before this they have betrayed God. Thus, the consequence of this was that God made you overpower them, and God knows everything. He is very wise. So, of course, this is something that has been said earlier on, that because before this they had betrayed God. And a reference, of course, here is to the betrayal of the Quraysh, in which they were guilty of regarding the house of God, which Abraham had built, and the religion that was revealed to him. So, the khiyana, or the dishonesty, or the betrayal which is being talked about here is, of course, the attitude that they had adopted, being the custodians of the Baitullah. Remember, they were the custodians of the Baitullah. They were they were its keepers, they looked after its affairs, and this was a big position. And we know that it was by virtue of this position that they earned the respect of all Arabia. So their tribe was specially given protection, reverence. It would never be looted because people would know that they are the custodians of the house of God. Now, in spite of this, we know that they adopted polytheism, and instead of adhering to monotheism and transformed this place of worship, this magnificent place of worship that was made a center of monotheism for mankind, into a place of idol worship in order to achieve their vested interests. So we know that this is something that happened in a period of time. Initially, when Abraham had settled his progeny, Ishmael, of course, and his mother Hagar, so they were responsible for spreading the light of monotheism in that whole land of Arabia. But gradually, we know that this monotheism gave way to polytheism, and all sorts of blatant forms of polytheism crept into their religion. We know that the stage was reached in which the house of God housed about 360 idols within its precincts, which means that every tribe, almost every tribe, had its own idol which was worshipped. And it was thought that these idols basically are deities, or they are daughters of God, and these are the idols of angels, and they will procure nearness for the Quraysh, for the people of Arabia, because God is someone they cannot reach, and it is these intercessors through whom they can actually reach God. So we know this is something that was made a philosophy. And of course, this philosophy was something that was totally rejected by the Quran. The Quran, on numerous occasions, told them that God is accessible. He does not need any intermediary. You can directly come to Him. There is only one God. And if you think that there are more than one God, then why do you think that God has not disclosed this to you? He was not your enemy. If there was a partner or more than one partners that he had, he would have been the first to inform you. And since this has not been the case, and they are guilty of fabricating a falsehood on God. And that is why the Quran has called polytheism as iftara Allah, which means it's a falsity ascribed to God. This is what they have done without any basis, without any reason. And viewers, it is precisely for this reason that we find the Quran telling us that the Almighty can forgive all other sins, but polytheism, which is intentional, and a person continues to do it in spite of knowing that there is one God, then that is something which is unforgivable in the sight of God. إن الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك بعضهم أولياء بعض والذين آمنوا ولم يهاجروا ما لكم من ولايتهم من شيء حتى يهاجروا وإن استنصروكم في الدين فعليكم النصر إلا على قوم بينكم وبينهم ميثاق والله بما تعملون بصير. Believers, if in this situation a Muslim seeks help and support, tell him to come to Medina, because those who have accepted faith and migrated and have fought with their persons and wealth for the cause of God, and those who have given refuge to the immigrants and helped them, they are the ones who are helpers of one another. As for those who accepted faith but did not migrate to Medina, you can have no relationship of help and support with them until they migrate. However, if they seek your help in the matter of religion, then helping them is mandatory upon you, but not against a nation with whom you have a treaty. Remember that God is watching whatever you do. So, as you can see, that one of the benchmarks that had become evident in those times, what the people have professed faith, then they would be able to, or they would be required to to express or show this faith by actually migrating, because the Prophet had migrated, and now it was a sign of faith for them to migrate as well. So tell him to come to Medina, because those who have accepted faith and migrated and have fought for their persons and wealth for the cause of God, and those who have given refuge to the immigrants and helped them, they are the ones who are helpers of one another. Now, of course, this is a reference to the Ansar, the people who lived in Medina. They welcomed the immigrants with open arms. They allocated their belongings, their household belongings, their needs were fulfilled by them. And they went out of the way to actually accommodate these Muhajirun. And we know from the Quran that this is something of a great a blessing that that they had actually in themselves, and God was extremely pleased with them because it was they who, in this regard, had gone out of the way to help these immigrants who were totally helpless. They had nothing. They had abandoned their homes and their belongings, and so we know that when they came to Medina, there was this misak or covenant that was established by the Prophet, the covenant of brotherhood between the Muhajirun and the Ansar, in which every Ansar person was required to house a family of the immigrants, or whatever they could easily do. And in this regard, we find some of the finest examples being set by the Ansar, in which they sacrificed and they were truly in the spirit of altruism. They gave them this refuge, and this is still a golden chapter in Islamic history. So that is why they have been praised here. And it is said that who have fought with their persons and wealth for the cause of God, and who have given refuge to the immigrants and helped them, they are the ones who are helpers of one another. So the Quranic words are Ulaika ba'duhum awliya ba'd, and they are the ones who are really helpers of one another. They are the ones who are the friends of one another. But on the other hand, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يُهَاجِرُوا مَا لَكُم مِّن وِلَايَتِهِم مِّن شَيْءٍ. But on the other hand, see, people who have accepted faith but have not migrated to Medina, now the Quran says you cannot have any relationship with them and of help and support with them until they migrate. And if they don't do so, of course, then there is no responsibility. However, if they seek your help in the matter of religion, then helping them is mandatory upon you, but not against a nation with whom you have a treaty. And remember that God is watching you. So the important thing once again here is that we have to understand that people who do not migrate for the cause, for the very cause that they had accepted faith, at that time it became a benchmark. It became a mark of distinction for a person to be called a Muslim and accepted as a Muslim. So the Quran says that those people who do not migrate, so you don't have any relationship with them. مَا لَهُم مِّن وِلَايَتِهِم مِّن شَيْءٍ حَتَّى يُهَاجِرُوا, unless they also migrate and join you. And if they seek help from you in the matter of religion, فَعَلَيْكُمُ النَّصْرُ, then of course this is an exception, that you must help them. If they seek help and they have yet to migrate, you can help them, but you cannot help them if there is a treaty between you and a nation which is at war with them. So if there is a treaty with them, ala qawmin bainakum wa bainahum mithaq, which means that helping is mandatory upon you, but not against a nation with whom Muslims have had a treaty. If they have made a covenant of peace with them, and the people who have not yet migrated, they are at war with that entity with whom Muslims of Medina have made peace, then of course they cannot help them. Why? Because they have made this covenant of peace that they will not fight. Now, viewers, this is a very, very remarkable thing which the Quran has presented here, that even in the case of war with a Muslim nation, such that the people who are not there in Medina, I mean, they're in Mecca and they have yet to migrate, and they ask for the help of the people of Medina. So, because they have given their word to an ally that they will not fight against them, even in this case, because of being promising them that they shall not fight whenever there is a aggression against them, then they cannot do that. Now, this is a remarkable way, and it's a remarkable thing to understand as well, that even against enemies, when this is something that happens and you have made a treaty, then you cannot go back on your word. And this is such a magnificent thing, and to understand and realize that how important it was for the Quran to guide the Muslims, that you cannot go back on your word. You just cannot, because this is something that is absolutely incumbent upon them to follow. Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir, and God is watching whatever you do. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. Those who are rejectors of the truth are helpers and supporters of one another. Therefore, O Prophet, if you do not do this for your oppressed brethren, there will be persecution in the land and great disorder. Now, of course, this is something that they have to understand, that people who are, people who have, disbelief we have to remember that they are one group. So that is why the Quran says, "Ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd." They are they are in no way the friends of the believers. They can have no relationship. Earlier on, we have seen that people who have not migrated, the Quran has categorically said that you cannot have a relationship with them of support and help with them until they migrate. Of course, that's a condition. Now, just going back to that initial verse, in those times, it was very difficult for a person to survive in Arabia without the help and assistance of your fellow brethren and allies. And before Islam, this support was provided to a person through his family and through his tribe. If a person faced any danger or difficulty, the people of his family would selflessly support him. And after accepting Islam, Muslims began to be deprived in this aspect from everywhere. The continuous state of war made matters even worse. The question then arose, what should be done with people who are living amongst disbelievers and have been left stranded without any help? Here, near the end of the surah, the Quran clearly says that this help and support is only possible when these people show strength and take one further step by migrating to Medina. The relationship of mutual support and help, which has been established between the Ansar and the Muhajirun, which I just referred to on the basis of the covenant of Medina, the Misaq of Medina, it is a golden chapter in Islamic history. It is this very relationship which has made them a strongly bonded unit, and people who have newly converted should also come forward, and in order to fulfill the requisites of their faith, they should participate in this jihad, and this will automatically earn them the help and support they are seeking. So they have to take one step further. And what has been prohibited is the responsibility of helping them in the absolute sense, come what may. Now, as for people who are harassed in the name of religion and they seek help, Muslims are bound to help them. So that is one condition, that harassment is something that they must come forward and offer their help against. And this has been stated, viewers, because at that time, an organized Muslim government had been set up in Medina, and they were in a position to take up this responsibility, keeping in view their military might. So yes, this is again something that Muslims must always do, that if a nation with whom a Muslim state has a peace treaty is guilty of oppressing Muslims, then the oppressed cannot be helped by violating the treaty, which is, as I said earlier on, something which is very, very remarkable. And then the Quran, of course, says that الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. Now, these are very grand words from the Quran. Those who are rejectors of the truth are helpers and supporters of one another. Therefore, O believers, if you do not do this for your oppressed brethren, there will be persecution in the land, and fasadun kabir, and a great, great disorder. Now, this is stated as far as, we have to understand that the persecution that was let loose by the Quraysh in those times was phenomenal. It was something that, we find incidents in Islamic history that really tear our heart apart, that they are so heart-rending. We know what happened to Bilal radiallahu anhu. We know what happened to Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu and his family, and scores of other people, to the extent that they had even to migrate to the land of Taif. Now, the reason why it is essential to help such people in the matter of religion is also something that we should know. And that is why the Quran has said that if you don't help such people, then there will be fitna, there will be persecution, and fasadun kabir, and great disorder in the land. Now, it is a matter of reward for them to persecute and harass any person who accepts Islam. This is what their tool was, that they would harass and persecute anyone who would accept Islam. That is how the Quraysh moved forward. And matters reached the state that the honor of their brethren to save them from the clutches of the oppressor was dashed to ground. Their lives and wealth they actually became legal for consumption. And if in such a situation, even Muslims do not help these people, it will mean that in order to persecute people, oppression and injustice will become rampant in the land. So unless there is some treaty with them, the Quran is absolutely clear that if they are passing through this persecution and injustice, then they are bound to be helped. And then, of course, it is said, إِلَّا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. And for them, again, which the later words say, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ أَوَوْا وَنَصَرُوا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا لَهُم مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. Every one of you should now understand that those who accepted faith and migrated and waged jihad for the cause of God, and those who gave refuge to the immigrants and have helped them, it is they who are true believers. For them are forgiveness and an honorable sustenance. Now, for them is forgiveness and an honorable sustenance. Again, this is very understandable, because this is actually an exhortation to wage jihad in those circumstances. The Quran has made it clear that in this situation, these two things have become the barometer of truth. It is essential for every person who lays claim to faith to migrate to Medina and, together with the Muhajirun and the Ansar, participate in the jihad against the disbelievers. So these are the two barometers that became a distinctive feature. A person will be regarded as true in faith if he either becomes a Muhajir or an Ansar. He could not have been someone who was not either of the two. No other option thus was available. So we can see that it is evident from this that in order to help religion, migration and jihad are two such requirements which are irreplaceable, as you can see. وَالَّذِينَ آوَوْا وَنَصَرُوا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا. And before that, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. That those who have professed faith and have migrated and have waged war. Clearly, these are the two benchmarks. And on such occasions, these two become the first and last requirements from every Muslim. And of course, then we have seen that the further words are, and those who gave refuge to the immigrants and have helped them, it is they who are true believers. Now, again, this is a blessing that has been put forth, that people who have migrated and participated with you in jihad, they too will be among you. That is something that the Quran has said in unequivocal terms, that people, in spite of this situation, they know that as far as God is concerned, He is going to reward them. And Muslims also who have a small heart for those who join them later. That is something that that is something that we have to know. And if today God has given them the urge and opportunity to accept this call, they must be grateful for this. He will give the same urge and opportunity to others in future. And Muslims must not welcome these new entrants with a sense of superiority. Those who are joining them, they should be humble before them, thinking that they might seek their refuge. And it's not that they are on a higher pedestal because they are giving them refuge. No, they are equal. They should welcome them with love and affection. And concealed, therefore, viewers, in these words, obviously, is also the urge for the newcomers to adhere to faith and undertake migration and jihad. And the words, of course, are, as a result, لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا مَعَكُمْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنْكُمْ وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. And those who accepted faith after this and migrated and participated with you in jihad, they too will be among you. So, as I said earlier on, that this migration for people who came later, of course, as long as they did do so, the Quran says for them also is the same reward, and they will be regarded amongst you. So the Quranic words are فَأُولَٰئِكَ minkum, they will be regarded amongst you. And then, of course, these final words, of course, they sound this very important caution that blood relations, however, are closer to one another in the law of God. So in spite of this covenant of Misaq, of the brotherhood that took place, that will not overrule blood relations. Now, this is a very apt reminder. The help and support mentioned above do not mean that God has changed the rights and obligations that emanate from blood relationships, from that family bond. This certainly is not the case. Those rights and obligations are still intact in the law of God. Blood relations and the right of inheritance and other related affairs on the basis of these relations are a permanent part of the law of God. However, the support and help that they do is something which is over and above. This cannot change the blood and the family ties which they already have with their own family. They have priority in all circumstances and should be fulfilled before fulfilling any requirement of help and support on the basis of religion. Now, this directive of God, of course, we know is based on His flawless knowledge, and that is why the closing verse of this surah is are undoubtedly God knows everything. He has prescribed a situation and a place for everything that happens. All rights and obligations must be fulfilled, keeping in view this aspect. So, viewers, with this, we come to an end to this surah. It is a mighty surah. It is a surah that actually, as we shall progress on to the next surah, will tell us that how beautifully it has laid the foundations for that final verdict to be announced in the very next surah, which is Surah Tawbah. Surah Bara also is its name. And the word bara actually comes from the very first word of the surah that we'll be studying, inshallah, in our next session. And that is the only surah in the Quran that you might know is a surah which begins without the formulaic Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And as we shall see when we study that surah, the reason is very evident. It is a surah of punishment. It is a surah of God's wrath being encapsulated in that surah. So there is no question of any mercy. They have lost that opportunity to be shown mercy, and now the time has arrived for their own final fate to be announced. So with this, we come to an end to today's session, inshallah. We'll take up the next surah in our next session. For the moment, if you have any questions, we, of course, can tackle them.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saleem. Assalamualaikum, everyone. If anybody has any questions, kindly raise your hand so we can address them. Otherwise, we will move to the idiomatic translation. Dr. Saleem, I do not see any raised hands, so I'm thinking maybe we can begin the translation and come back to the questions.
Okay. So this starts off with verse 68 in this way. لولا كتاب من الله سبق لمسكم فيما أخذتم عذاب أليم. So law is if, la is not. Kitabu min Allah. Kitabu min Allah means something written. Kitab is something that is written, min from Allah, God. So had something not been written from God, sabaka, beforehand. So had something not been ordained beforehand, lamassakum. Lamassakum would have reached you. Fima, because of what? Akhaztum, you did. Azabun azim, a great torment. So had God's word not been written down, had the verdict that he has in mind had not been announced and written down beforehand, then a great torment would have come to you, O Quraysh, because of what you had done. Fima akhaztum, what you had done. Lamassakum would have touched you. Azabun azim, a great penalty or a great punishment. Fa, therefore, kulu, eat, mimma, from, ghanimtum, you have earned from the spoils of war, halalan tayyiba, as pure and wholesome. Wattaqullah, and fear God. Wattaqu, fear Allah, God. Inna, indeed, Allah, God. Ghafoor, forgiving. Rahim, merciful. Indeed, God is forgiving and merciful. Ya ayyuhan nabi, O Prophet, kul, tell, liman, those, fi, in, aidikum, in your hand, min al asra, amongst the prisoners. So those amongst you in your hands who are prisoners, tell them. So literally it means who are in your possession. What is in your hand is actually in your possession. So that is why idiomatically it would mean anything which you own, which you possess. And of course, here the matter is regarding the prisoners of war. So, O Prophet, tell the prisoners of war that are in your ownership. What should be told? That is mentioned right after. In ya'lamillahu fi qulubikum. In is if. Ya'lam knows. Allah, God. Fi, in. Qulubikum, your hearts. If God knows something in your hearts, khaira, as good. In other words, if God spots anything good in your heart, yu'tikum, he will give you khaira, what is best. So if he spots something good, he will give you something good. Mimma, from that. Ukhiza, what has been taken. Minkum, from you. Wa, and yaghfir lakum, and he shall forgive you. Wa, and Allah, God, Ghafoor, forgiving. Rahim, merciful. And God is merciful and forgiving. Wa, and in, if. Yuridu, in yuridu, if you want to. Khiyanataka, if they want to. So yuridu, if they want to. Khiyanataka, be dishonest with you. If they intend to, or if they want to be dishonest with you. Faqad khanu, faqad, indeed. Khanu, they have been dishonest. Allah, with God. So if they want to be dishonest with you, this is nothing new. They have already been dishonest to God earlier, min qabl, earlier. فَأَمْكَنَ مِنْهُمْ, and God made you overpower them. فَأَمْكَنَ مِنْهُمْ, and God made you overpower them. Wa, and Allah, God, Aleem, knowledgeable, Hakim, wise. And God is knowledgeable and wise. Inna, indeed, allazina, those who amanu, professed faith, wa, and hajaru, migrated, wa, and jahadu, waged jihad, bi amwalihim, with their wealth, wa anfusihim, and with their persons, fi, in sabilillah, the cause of God, the path of God. So indeed, those who have professed faith and migrated and waged war with their wealth and with their persons for the cause of God, wa, and allazina, those who awaw, gave refuge, wa, and nasaru, and helped, ulaika, they, ba'duhum, some of them, awliya, friends, ba'd, some of them. So this is the literal translation. Otherwise, idiomatically, it would mean that those who have given refuge and they have helped them, they are the ones, ulaika ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd, they are the ones who help one another or who are helpers of one another. Wa, and allazina, those who amanu, have professed faith, wa, and lam, not yuhajiru, migrated as yet, lam yuhajiru, not migrated as yet, ma, not lakum, for you, min wilayatihim, any relationship, or min wilayatihim would mean relationship, min shay, any sort of, hatta, until, yuhajiru, they migrate. So those who have professed faith but have yet to migrate, you do not have any relationship with them until they migrate. Hatta yuhajiru. Wa, and in, if istansarukum, they ask for your help, fid deen, regarding some matter of religion, regarding some aspect of religion. Fa, therefore, alaykum, incumbent upon you, alaykum, incumbent upon you, an nasr, this help. So if they ask help for you in the matter of religion, then it is incumbent upon you, it is mandatory upon you to help them. Illa, except, ala qaumin, except if regarding a nation, bainakum, between you, wa bainahum, and between them, misak, there is a treaty, there is a covenant. So in this case, you will not be, of course, in any way obligated to help them because you have a treaty with that nation. Wa, and Allah, God, bima, about, ta'maluna, you do, basir, aware or watching. So God is watching all that you do. Wa, and allazina, those who kafaru, disbelieved, ba'duhum, some of them, awliya'u, friends, ba'd, some of them. So in other words, this is the style of the Quran, which actually means that those who have disbelieved, they are friends of one another. They are helpers of one another. Illa, if not, taf'aluhu, you do that, takun, will become, fitnatun, great persecution, fil ard, in the land, wa, and fasadun kabir, great anarchy. So what is said is, illa taf'aluhu, if you don't do this, if you don't help them, which they have asked, takun fitna, fil ard, a great persecution will ensue in the land. Great persecution will happen in the land, fil ard, in the land, wa fasadun kabir, and a great anarchy as well, a great disorder as well. Wa, and allazina, those who amanu, have professed faith, wa, and hajaru, have migrated, wa, and jahadu, have waged jihad, fi sabilillah, for the cause of God, wa, and allazina, those who awaw, given refuge, wa, and nasaru, and helped. And those who have given refuge and helped, ulaika, they are, whom, indeed, al-mu'minun, believers, hakka, in truth. So those who have given refuge and helped them, they are in fact the true believers. La, for whom, them, lahum, for them, maghfirah, forgiveness, wa, and rizqun, sustenance, kareem, noble. So for them is forgiveness and a noble sustenance. Wa, and allazina, those who amanu, have migrated, mimbad, after them, wa, and hajaru, those who have professed faith, mimbadu, wa hajaru, and have migrated, wajahadu, and have waged war, ma'akum, with you. فَأُولَٰئِكَ, therefore they, minkum, will be counted among you. If they, so that is something that has been said, that people who migrate, people who first profess faith and then migrate later and wage war with you, wage jihad with you, they will also be counted amongst you. Wa and ulul arham. So ulul arham means familial relations or blood ties or blood relations. Ba'duhum, some of them, awla, more closer, biba'd, some of them, fi, in, kitabillah, the law of God. So blood relations, however, are closer to each other in the law of God, which means that they cannot be overridden by the Misaq of Medina or by the covenant of Medina. They'll stay in place. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, bikulle, about everything, about every, in fact, shay is thing. So indeed, God about everything, alim, knowledgeable. So God is knowledgeable about everything. So viewers, this brings us to an end to this surah and to this idiomatic and literal translation as well. And we can proceed with your questions.
Assalamualaikum everyone. If you have any questions, kindly raise your hand so we can address them, Dr. Saleem. Okay, I do have a chat question, but first our questions are going to be related to the passage. So any questions that you have in the chat or when you raise your hands, make sure that they are regarding the surah we have studied or the verses we studied today, and then we'll move on to the general forum. Okay, I do have a question, Dr. Saleem, but that is not related to the passage here, so I'll wait on it. If anybody has any questions related to the passage. So so Dr. Saleem, I have a question in the meantime. So why is it the pinnacle is in the middle of the Quran, or the climax, Surah Tawbah? Is there a reason for
Yes.
it?
It's not even in the middle of the Quran. It is in the first one third. I mean, it's like the one third of the Quran has finished, and you still have two thirds of the Quran. I think, I mean, although we don't have any reason from the Quran itself or from the Prophet, but what I have understood, or maybe I think is one plausible reason for this, is that the Quran is addressing two distinct denominations. One, the people of the book, which were residing mostly in Medina, and two, the Quraysh, which were residing mostly in Mecca. So there were two addressees, and the surahs have been arranged thus that the discussion between one type of addressee is in one part of the Quran that, of course, leads to the climax, and the other addressees are mentioned more in the other part of the Quran. So what I'm saying here is that in chapters 1 and 2, you will find that the discussion is more regarding the people of the book and how they have been warned that look what you have done and how you have behaved. You were waiting for a prophet of God. Both Jews and Christians had the mention of the prophet in their scriptures, and they ultimately denied him, and so therefore their punishment is something that is in order. And on the other hand, if you look at chapters 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, right up to chapter 2, if you look at them in the reverse order, the addressees are mostly the idolaters. So in the first one third of the Quran, you'll find mostly the people of the book being addressed, and in the two thirds of the Quran, you'll find the idolaters being addressed. Now, there could have been a mixture in which the Almighty would have addressed both, and this would have resulted in a linear sort of a climax in which the climax would have occurred right at the end. But I think God did not choose this to happen because He wanted both these addressees to be distinctly separated. And because the book of God is in the form of dialogues, in the form of conversation, so everything that was related to one faction, which is of course like the people of the book is one faction, that was done in one go in one straight chapter. And similarly, the remaining chapters they had to deal with the other denomination, and they actually were more, and that is why we find that two thirds of the Quran deals with the idolaters and speaks to them, talks to them, tells them how for centuries they have been incriminated with the filth of polytheism. They started off with Ismail being settled in Mecca in the time when everything was fine and there was monotheism for a long period of time, and then polytheism crept into them. So because these two, I would say, opponents of the Prophet, or these two addressees of the Prophet were distinct, they had their distinct background, they had their distinct beliefs, So it does seem that God wanted to treat them separately. And that is why we find this skewed sort of a arrangement. And yes, this could still have been a central arrangement with half of the maybe content reserved for one denomination and the other half for the other denomination. But again, this does not take place because you see the problem with the idolaters was much graver than what was with the people of the book, because people of the book were already monotheists. They were just deviant monotheists. So lesser amount of work had to be done, and they were already aware of a book of God, and they were already waiting for a prophet. So that was like 1/3 that was reserved for them, and 2/3 was reserved for the idolaters, because they were the ones who had gone astray for centuries. They had not been a single prophet. In fact, after Prophet Ishmael, the only prophet that came to them was Prophet Muhammad. That's 2.5 I mean, that's like 2,500 years. That's a big time. However, in the case of the people of the book, we find that the progeny of Isaac were blessed with prophets of God. They were all monotheists, of course. They knew, they had a very good knowledge of the scriptures. All these prophets that came in that branch, they were recorded in the Quran, of course, and before them in the Bible as well. So I think this is why they have been treated separately. And this could have been a very evenly distributed thing had the two been of equal nature. But that is also not the case, as I just said, that there was one, like the people of the book, who were fairly aware. They were still monotheists. So lesser amount of debate was needed for them. Plus, they were already waiting for the prophet. And on the other hand, the mushrikun, they were far more deviant, because they had slumped deep down into polytheism. And in fact, they had earned the title of al-mushrikun, which means the real polytheists of Arabia. So they had to be dealt with in more detail, and that is how I understand it.
So tell me, for somebody who's a mushrikun, the what's going to happen to them is mentioned before the guidance.
So
Is
that is
that
something
true?
that we'll be dealing in the next surah. Whatever is going to
Okay.
be happening to the mushrikun is taken up in the very first part of the next surah. Next up, we find what is going to happen to the people of the book. And thirdly, we'll see what will happen to the hypocrites. So this is exactly the theme of the next surah, that
Right.
how they will be treated and how they will be, I mean, they'll meet their fate. This is like an announcement made in the next surah in the same order.
Okay, I have a chat question, Dr. Saleem. Medina is not mentioned. Dar al-Islam is Medina. My translation mentions Dar al-Islam. So verse
Mhm.
72. That's the question or comment or whatever you may want to call it. If you want to
Verse
address that.
72.
G.
Yes, of course. I mean, Medina does not need to be mentioned, because you remember the Quran is traveling with established history. It is not something that is giving you all the information. There is a lot of history, established history, which is traveling with the Quran. People who were aware of what was happening in the Quran, they did not need to be told. And we are, of course, aware as a result of their awareness. So remember, you don't need to extract all the details from the Quran, because with the Quran was traveling that established history. So it is established history that we know that Medina is Darul Islam. It is the place that the Prophet migrated to. And that is why it's not at times even mentioned. The problem is that at times people think that the Quran should give all the nitty-gritties and then all the small details as well. That is not what the Quran does. Because, as I said, established history is in the background of the Quran. It is traveling with the Quran. It's not something that the Quran is not dependent upon.
Okay, I have another question. With denying the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the infidels invited the wrath of Allah. But how many of the infidels were really killed or annihilated, as you said earlier? Or did they dodge his wrath by converting to Islam, or
Uh,
am I confusing the two?
So you see, a greater part of the idolaters actually converted. If you look at the last surah of one of the last surah says, "Yadkhuluna fi dinillahi afwaja," that they entered the folds of Islam in multitude. A very large part actually entered the folds of Islam. There were very few people left. In fact, 4 or 5 of them, we can count them on our fingers. And about them, the Prophet said that even if they accept faith, and even if you find them in clinging to the curtains of the Kaaba, they'll not be spared because of their high treason, because of their subversive activity. So, because of their being war criminals, etc., about them there was this exceptional treatment. Otherwise, we were told that basically all of them had accepted faith. These were just 3 or 4 people.
Okay, another question. The respite that was given to the believers, even though we are different from those times, we also sometimes feel many times that God gives us a chance to go back to his path. How similar are we to those times regarding this?
We are very, very different from them because they had no chance. You remember, they were the adversaries of a prophet of God who was standing right in front of them. So for them, it was make or break because truth had been with full clarity delivered to them and they had no excuse not to accept it. As far as we are concerned, because we are not living in the times of a messenger of God, we can still have excuses of not being very clear about the message. There could be some confusions, and there are people, there still are a lot of confusion. So we would be perhaps given some more concession. However, in the times of the Prophet, because of the person of the Prophet being present there, delivering God's message in an ultimate way, in a conclusive way, so for them it was, I mean, if they had not accepted, it would have been curtains for them. But for us, we are given this latitude that because we are not living in the times of the Prophet and he's not amongst us, so there is a chance that we might still deviate with sincerity. I mean, we can still be deviants in spite of not being intentionally wanting to be deviants, if you understand. So that is why we are, in this respect, very different from people who would have existed in his times.
Okay. If anybody has any questions pertaining to the passage, kindly raise your hands. Okay, so a question is, any tips on how to recognize the Meccan or Medinan surahs easily?
Oh, yes, it's very easy. It's just a question of, I would say, reading a surah very carefully. And now that this has been done by the scholars, as I explained earlier on, if you look at the 7 chapters of the Quran, every chapter of the Quran begins with a Meccan surah or more than one Meccan surah, and all chapters of the Quran end on one or more than one Medinan surah. So all the Meccan surahs in a chapter are in one line. When they finish, the Medinan surah start, and then this completes that chapter, and the next chapter begins always with the Meccan surah. And not only this arrangement is evident, but furthermore, you'll see the topics, the content is so clear, is so evident from the content of that chapter, of that surah, that it is quite unmistakable that you could regard any Madin surah to be Meccan or Meccan to be Madinan, except, of course, if you regard the ascertainment of these surahs to be outside of the Quran, as people have done. So they would regard a surah to be Meccan or Madinan not because of the content, but because of outside content, like certain ahadith telling us that, well, this surah was revealed in Medina and this surah was revealed in Mecca. Now, let me give you an example. In the case of Surah Fatiha, which is clearly, we know is a Meccan surah, there are hadiths which say that it's a Medinan surah, and there are hadiths which say it's a Meccan surah. So the confusion that has arisen about a Meccan and Medinan surah is not because if you rely on the content, it will not become evident. It is because you rely not on the content which is within the Quran, but outside of the Quran, if you rely on various ahadiths which point at times to the fact whether a surah is Meccan or Medinan. So what we have to do is understand the nature of the content of each surah. Each surah will guide you itself, whether it's a Meccan surah or a Medinan surah. For this, you don't need to rely on ahadith. And let me also tell you that many of the ahadith that relate to the Meccan and Medinan revelations, they are not also very authentic. But because people tend to rely on them, so at times there are confusing reports. You'll see some scholars telling the same surah to be Meccan and others calling it to be Medinan. And as I said, that's not because of any intrinsic evidence. It's always because of that extrinsic evidence in which you rely on hadith literature.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. I'm still waiting for. Okay, so I have a question. Yesterday, I couldn't clarify my question regarding the reverse order was going from surah to surah. It seems as if we go from macro to micro level. I have felt this until 89 chapter Surah Al-Fajr. I'm still learning. If you can clarify, I don't really
No, I don't understand. I
understand the
mean,
question.
you need to be more detailed. What exactly do you feel to be micro and macro if you read backwards from Surah Al-Fajr? And why is the need at all for this to happen that you read backwards? I think that when the Quran is arranged in a particular sequence, why not keep that sequence if you have to understand the theme of the Quran? I mean, of course, you can read from any part and you can go backwards, but by going backwards, you cannot determine the whole theme or structure of the Quran. That can only be done if you read it in sequence.
I think she's saying it regarding memorizing the smaller chapters. That's what
I mean,
she's
that is
written.
fine. I mean, if you're asking about memorizing the final chapters, that is what people do generally because the surahs are shorter. But that does not reflect on the theme in any way. The shorter surahs are generally all of them are Meccan. For example, if you look at the last chapter of the Quran, it starts off with Surah Mulk, which is the 67th surah, and goes up to Surah Nas, which is the 114th surah. You'll find that 48 surahs are all Meccan surahs. From Surah Mulk to Surah Ahad or Ikhlas, these are all Meccan surahs. There are just two Madinah surahs in the last chapter, and they are Surah Falak and Surah Nas. So, I mean, it depends on how you look at them. You have to understand that the only Madinan surahs in the last chapter are the last two surahs, and all the rest are Meccan surahs.
Okay, it seems, Dr. Salim, nobody has questions regarding the passage. Can I open the forum for general questions?
Ji, please go ahead.
Now we'll be taking general questions. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hands and I'll address them with Dr. Salim. So I had a question, Dr. Salim. So what part of the Quran is a larger part is Meccan then?
Oh yes,
Medina is
2/3 of the Quran is easily Meccan.
okay. Okay. So another question, actually, somebody had put in the chat yesterday, and I'm not sure if I was able to get to it or not. So I'll ask it today. Somebody had asked that what is the role of a married woman in Islam? Because the men have been instructed to earn and take responsibility of the household, they're the head of the household. So a woman has not been specifically commanded to look after the household, to look after the children. That's basically read between the lines. So what is the role of a married woman? Does she is she just supposed to be taken care of? What is her
I
role?
mean, it's just a common thing, and the role is absolutely evident that she can live a life according to her own wishes. She can be a professional, she can work. So, I mean, it's similar to a man. I mean, just as a man has or a husband has the prerogative to work, to be a professional, similarly, women have the same prerogative. The only thing is that the structure of the family has been defined such that husbands are regarded to be the head of the family. So, that is the only thing that has been pointed out. The rest has all been left as fluid, something that you can determine your own self, something that you can work out between yourselves. Any formula, any understanding, anything that works out with mutual consent, and preferably before you enter into the marriage contract, if you are able to convey that this is my role, this is what my role would be. So the Quran or Islam does not have any objection to any role as far as it is predetermined or maybe even determined after marriage. And the only thing that it legislates is that the husbands are the head of the family, and that too because they are responsible to earn for the family. They are the breadwinners of the family. This is all as far as the Sharia is concerned. Other than that, whatever role that you can define for yourself is fine as long as the norms of what you are being told regarding family life are met.
But and Dr. Salim, that in itself seems to give great freedom and emancipation to women if it's understood correctly. There are no direct
Yes, that is
commands
correct.
by Allah that they have to.
Obviously,
Isn't
see
that
what has
true? If
happened is, yes, that is correct. What has happened is actually our Eastern culture, in which women have generally been confined to their homes, and not just the Eastern culture. Maybe a century ago, this was the same for all the world. That women were just mostly not professionals, and there was a equilibrium that had come automatically in place that men would be working out and women would not generally work. Of course, in the case of I would say village life, women would be working with men as well, but mostly not as professionals, but as a working hand. So, as in the last 100 years, professionalism has been developed. So now that professionalism is something that at times, if it becomes evident, it is equally accessible to both men and women. But because in certain countries they are still to take that leap of women becoming professionals, so they are living in that past structural society in which women mostly stay at home because they are not working. So a woman who's not working, of course, does not need to go out, and automatically the tasks of looking after the house or the children, they are delegated to her. So that's like a default sort of a situation. It's not something by design or something that is imposed in any way or prescribed by the Quran. It's something that was happening, and people got used to it, and they started to accept it, and then they wrongly actually applied this verse of the Quran that says that men are the guardians or the head of the family. Now they thought that, well, this means that they are the head of the family in the sense that Basically, women are to be confined to their homes. And of course, not just this verse, there are some other verses of the Quran as well that they read in juxtaposition in unison, and they thought that the circle of activity of a woman is home, because there is a verse also in Surah Ahzab which has, according to them, a similar meaning. And that is how it progressed. And no one thought that it is anything different. But now, in the last 40 or 50 years, as Muslim women have started to become professionals, so now the question has become important. Earlier on, it was not even a question because women had accepted a role. Now, because of becoming professionals, they have a new role. And now, if that role in any way is something which their husbands object to, so they have to be told that this is something which the Quran has never objected to. If the Quran says that whatever family structure that the two mutually agree upon is fine. The only thing, as I said, that it imposes is that men or husbands, come what may, are liable to earn for the children and for the wife.
Right. And also, Dr. Salim, I also feel that sometimes in households that are joint family, specifically in South Asia, women have culturally been thinking that they are obligated to cook and to clean and to do
Right,
everything because that's just how it's been. But it's
right.
nothing to do with the way the Quran has instructed it. Okay, I have another question. In Surah Al Balad, you have translated people as the fortunate and unfortunate ones. But the same words in another surah are translated as right handed and left handed. Kindly explain. The words are
Uh-huh.
Al Mimana and Al Mashama.
Al Maymana and Al Mash'ama.
Al Maymana and Mal Mashama.
So Ashabul Maymana and Ashabul Mash'ama. So these, of course, are the
Yeah.
companions of the right hand and companions of the left hand. And what is the other translation?
The other translation is you have translated people as fortunate and unfortunate ones, but the same words in another surah are translated as right handed and left handed people. Kindly
Well,
explain
you
on
see, the
this.
word Maimuna has two meanings, and Mash'ama has two meanings. So the Mash'ama means people who are unfortunate, basically, and Maimuna means who are fortunate. And at the same time, Maimuna also means people who are on the right hand. So it is the context that determines whatever meaning at a particular place is implied.
Okay, another question. How old was Bibi Khatija at the time of marriage and was she a widow before she got married?
So there has been a lot of research done in recent years, and that has actually, I would say, successfully refuted the previous theory in which she was regarded to be 40 years old. But I can tell you that earlier historians, many of them more authentic than the historians who say that she was 40, they say that she was about 27 or 28 years old at the time of marriage. And this seems to be much more plausible, but because the Prophet had 6 children from her, Fatima was the only survivor, but she had other children, and it is very unlikely for a 40-year-old widow to have 6 children from age 40 onwards. And also, the people who report her age to be 28 or 27 are more, I would say, reliable in their historical authority as the ones who report to be 40. So I personally think that the historical research that tells us that she was around 27 or 28 and the Prophet was around 25, maybe a couple of years younger to her, is the right one.
Right. Um, Another question. In the time of the Prophet, at what length did people understand the Quran directly without needing any further explanation, especially the learned ones?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? What
In
was
the
the?
time of the Prophet, in the
Hmm.
time of the Prophet, what length what length of people understood the Quran directly without needing any further explanation, especially the
All of
learned
them.
ones?
All of them understood the Quran because it was revealed in their language. They did not need to learn Arabic. Every single person of Arabia knew Arabic, they knew the Arabic of the Quran, they understood it. And this is, in fact, a favor which the Quran has mentioned at several places, that we have sent a prophet from among you. No one knew, and he speaks your own language. So basically, every single person in Arabia who knew Arabic, and it was easy for that person to understand the message of the Quran. Otherwise, the whole exercise would have been pointless. How could have God punished people on the basis of not accepting His message if the people were not able to understand the message? So from day one, whatever the Prophet uttered as soon as he got divine revelation was something that was accessible to all.
Okay, I have another question. Several hadith collections, including Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim and Musnad Ahmad, confirm that Ali Rahmatullah alayhi took a slave girl from the captives of Yemen as a share in the war booty. Humus was taking a slave girl uh, from uh, from the captives of Ali before formal distribution of the war booty humus by the Prophet in accordance with the Sharia?
Well, we have to investigate this. I have read this incident in some hadith books, and we need to investigate it further, what happened actually. Because remember, these reports are all diverse. Some of them say that he did take a slave girl, and before the distribution took place, others might have a different story to tell. I have yet to research on this incident, but I do feel that Ali Radhiyallahu anhu would not have done anything which was against the Sharia. It is more likely if something is reported in this regard would have been wrongly reported. But nonetheless, I can give you a final opinion only after I have done my bit of research.
So, Dr. Saleem, I've also read this that Hazrat Khatija was much younger. Can you give us a source of where you have it? And another question I had
Hmm.
was, why do you think it was reported that is widely believed that she was reported? Is it a kind of a deliberate thing just
No, no,
to
it's not a deliberate thing. You see, these errors do occur. So Waqidi is a very famous historian, and Muslim sources very heavily rely on him. So Waqidi is a person who reports that she was 40 years of age. But there are other historians like Bayhaqi, or similarly we have Ishaq bin Yasar, who was one of the earliest historians of the Prophet's life, the biographer. So these historians, they report that she was 27 or 28. So you see, these things become prominent. And remember, this was not a time in which ages were documented in a very, very clear manner. There were discrepancies, and not just in the case of Khadija Rizala Anhu. There are so many other. I can point out there are so many other cases as well in which there are discrepancies. So it is on the basis of some more evidence that we have to rely. So I think that if more than one people say certain thing about a certain fact, that's more likely to be true rather than one person saying something. So we only have one person, Waqidi, who became very famous because of his because of the fact that he was you can say that someone who was primarily regarded to be a very, very important person who wrote the biography of the historian of the Prophet as regarding his campaigns of war. So he became very famous for that. And Ibn Sa'd, as we all know, the first or one of the first historians of Islam, was actually his secretary. I mean, someone who wrote for him. So he had a very, very strong, I would say, stature that led to whatever he said to be regarded as true. But then, as I said, there are other historians who have a different view, and which is more plausible, because I think that the fact that she bore the Prophet 6 children, this could not have been, I think, biologically possible for a 40-year-old to do so. And it's more likely that she was 28-year-old, and more likely because there are more people reporting this age. However, because one of them has become more famous, so we think that there are no other views.
right? Was she a widow? That's another question.
Yes, she was.
Okay. Then I have another question in the chat that asks, is there a verse or a phrase of the Quran that you can keep in your mind when you feel a little down or just to strengthen your iman?
Well, there are several. I mean, there are several one-liners depending upon uh, what you feel like. For example, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel, that God is enough for me. He's the best defender, the best guardian. Similarly, if you feel that things are not happening your way, the Quran tells us that, I mean, at times things don't happen your way because there is something good which is hidden in it. And Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. God knows and you do not know. So you have to trust God. And of course, there can be several examples. So it all depends on what exactly you would like to have from the Quran. And people have actually compiled them as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saleem. I do not have any chat questions or any raised hands, Dr. Saleem, so I'm thinking we can end the session today and then inshallah reconvene next
Okay,
Saturday for another session
inshallah.
and then Sunday again. Thank you, Khuda Hafiz, everyone, and thank you for a wonderful session, Dr. Saleem.